Okay, so welcome to a series I'm calling What Makes It Great, where due to a mix of a love of gaming and sheer boredom of everything else, I look at a game I love and talk about key parts that it pulls off really well, with it, this time, being Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. The Legend of Zelda is one of the longest surviving video game series with just above 30 years under its belt, meaning it's older than YouTube's key demographic, assuming I'm not lying to you. This also makes The Legend of Zelda one of the more popular franchises in gaming, mainly due to its strong, long-kept formula of adventuring through beautiful overworlds and atmospheric dungeons, which pretty much everyone agreed was amazing. Up until around Skyward Sword came out, maybe a little bit after, and people just sort of weren't sure whether they were getting fed up with it, or not. Maybe it had something to do with the 25th anniversary being slapped on every box, made people realise they've been playing Legend of Zelda for so long. The point was it was getting stale, so Nintendo needed to mix things up a bit. So they decided to break Batman's back. No, wait. That's what DC did to Batman. To mix him up a bit. What Nintendo did is they decided they needed to air out The Legend of Zelda in an open field. Give it a breath of fresh air. Give it a breath of the wild. You get it? Just like in the title. Roll the credits. Now, I don't know what the wild smells like in Japan, but here in Old Blighty, the wild smells like pig shit and casual racism. Basically, sticking something in open space doesn't make it perfect, let alone better. At least not all the time. In fact, some people were starting to get sick of open world games before Breath of the Wild even came out. And guess what? 2 other open world games were released within the exact same week as Breath of the Wild. And one is clearly a horror game and the other's title just... doesn't make much sense. Zero Dawn? So, no dawn, so it's always nighttime? Heard it's good though. So is this Legend of Zelda, in an attempt to stand out from its own franchise, just blended with all the other open world AAA titles that seem to be coming out very frequently nowadays? Short answer, no. Slightly longer answer, no, because it's a fucking good game, at least in my opinion, which on the internet I can push as the truth. And I'm going to explain why through the journey of cooking. So, the game starts like it just starts. Really short intro. And boom, Link running around in Hyrule. Just like that, quick. Not as long, the evil is coming. Intro with Link playing Aaron Boy and shit. And there's a cat or something, you gotta help it or... You just get to play the game. The main part, the good part, and the first thing you pick up, the first thing you get as a weapon, is a tree branch. I love that. Nothing says there's a long road ahead and you're on your own like the game's saying, here you go. Here's your starting equipment. A fucking stick. Yeah. Good luck with that, buddy. Off you go. Go save the world, you. You fucker, you. The old Legend of Zeldas would have started you off with a small sword or a practice sword. It would even have the big old chest thing going on with the whole Even other RPGs tend to give you the beginner's level 1 sword, but it's still like an actual weapon. And it wouldn't even be that bad, it just means it's not made out of some magical element with the grip made out of troll butt or something dumb. In Skyrim, it doesn't even let you start with the shittiest weapon. They give you the one above, I think it's like steel or something. You start the game with tier 2 stuff. Like, what? Meanwhile, in the Breath of the Wild, it's just like a stick on the ground. Now, I know I haven't talked much about the cooking part like I said I would, but guess what? Chances are, the second thing you probably picked up was a mushroom. The first food item in the game you find is something very familiar, very basic and boring. Now, a lot of the things I said about the stick being the starting weapon applies to the mushroom being the first source of health and food in this game. You know how I said it was shitty and stuff, the stick, but in a good way? Same thing applies to the mushroom. Again, most other games start you off with a small health potion or something similar, but Breath of the Wild starts you off with what most other games wouldn't even think of using as a piece of equipment, as something the player can actually use. Other games would just push branches and mushrooms into the scenery. The next thing you might find is apples in the trees. Again, another small food item that would be lying on the ground everywhere amongst the mushrooms and branches. This is the game trying to teach the player 2 key aspects of the game. Firstly, gathering a lot of stuff is important, whether it's weapons, food, and later on tools and various other bits and bobs. If you can pick it up, you need it and probably a lot of it. The game encourages this by giving the player lots of inventory space for lots of food and multiple weapons, even if they're the same weapon. This is reinforced especially here because there's a lot of just branches for weapons and just apples and mushrooms for food. It has to push this idea even more so for players who are used to Legend of Zelda games, as they are used to using one permanent weapon for the first half and then a second, again permanent weapon for the second half of the game. Collecting a lot of the same weapon also acts as an early warning to players to let them know that they might need to replace it, like maybe your weapons might break or something. Spoiler, they do. And a lot. And the second point, that food in this game is extra important. In fact, the game developers could be telling the player that food is twice as important as weapons, so they introduce you to one weapon type, the branch, but two types of food, mushrooms and apples. Again, it pushes this concept even harder to players who are used to the Legend of Zelda games by introducing you to food before you even get a shield, which normally comes straight after you get your first weapon. Imagine if Skyward Sword started you off with a sword and a source of health, so let's say potion. It would throw you off so much, you'd wonder why it gave you a potion in the part of the game where you should be fairly safe saving cats from roofs. How dangerous is your home that the game is giving you a source of recovery before you got a source of defense? God, what is that cat gonna do to you when you save it? At this part of the game, I was always wondering when the game was going to give me a shield. Like, it was some sort of drug and I was in need of my fix because I was so used to having one by now. It's the first time I felt weak and ill-prepared at the start of an RPG in a long time, which is an amazing feeling to have, especially in an RPG, as it makes getting the stronger and better equipment in a later game much more rewarding. It also adds and plays off that joy of looking back when you are in the later game and thinking, wow, remember when I was just some prick in his little boy shorts with a stick and living off apples? And then you decide to start the game all over again and go through that feeling all over again, because it's such a good feeling to have. Anyway, I'm rambling a bit. But you then move down the cliff and you meet a defenseless old man, by which point your natural instincts kick in and you steal all his stuff, you heartless monster. One of the things you pick up is a baked apple. This, of course, is the game hinting at the player that they can cook things and that, hey, maybe cooking shit is a good idea. Cook food, don't cook literal shit. Don't do that. When you pick up the baked apple, the old man tells you about cooking too, as well as wanting to pull your leg. What leg do you want to pull? Hey, old timer. This all happens around a campfire so that you make the connection that food and fire makes cooked food. But if you're like me, you didn't try cooking anything at that point because you're not damaged, and therefore you don't need a cooked food, so you go out into the world. Now at some point you'll fight some enemies, and because you don't have a shield, there's a good chance you'll get damaged. So you use food for the first time, and because all you have is mushrooms and apples, you know you can use the food raw. But sooner or later you should find another open campfire. And remember seeing the baked apple by the old man's fire, so you try to recreate that by dropping all your food on the campfire and eating it off the ground like some sort of fucking savage. But it works, and now your shitty apples and mushrooms are worth a lot more health. And that is one of the things that is great in the Breath of the Wild. No, not your cooked apples and mushrooms, but how you cook them. Yeah, it looked a little dumb, but the game is designed for you as a player to go, I want this. This could be cooked apples or fish or wood or some other thing you go about in a very instinctive way, and the game goes, sure. That works because of course that works. If you hit a tree with an axe, it will fall down. If you hit the fallen log with an axe, you'll get the wood. If you have food and you want to cook it, applying it to fire will cook it, because of course it does. You don't have to go through some mini game for it, and I'll get back to this in a bit, because we just found the old man and clearly he has some form of alien technology that's going to blow your little boy short-rowing mind. Now this, which I can only assume is magic, is what the old man calls a cooking pot. And if you've been playing like me, and taking the stealth side of things too seriously, Colonel, what's a Sheikah Guardian doing here?
I have no idea.
This would be the first cooking pot you've seen. So the old man tells you can use it to cook meals, which is much better than just cooking the odd apple. And by going out your way to explore his hut, you can find hints that cooked meals can also give bonuses to the player, beyond just giving them their health points back. It also rewards the player by giving the player a few chilies, which will come in useful for getting to one of the first shrines, as it's on a snowy mountain, and eating spicy foods will keep Link warm. All this just because the player decided to look in an old hut, because that's how you encourage exploration in the early game. So, You decide to kill a pigeon and start cooking. Now in other games, cooking tends to just be put alongside crafting and will require the player to activate a cooking station or something. And the actual cooking part, the exciting part of the process, is almost always just the player stuck in a menu, whether it's the game telling you what meals you can cook, and just selecting which one you want, or just watching a small graphic go, yeah, it's cooking, okay, and done. Now in the Breath of the Wild, the only menu you encounter in the whole game part of the game is the inventory, because nobody has designed a fun way of telling the game to get something out of their character's mallet space. But with the design of the inventory menu in the Breath of the Wild, where you can see the food you have gathered as opposed to just a list of it, it feels more like you're actually looking through a bag full of your food and equipment. So what you do is you pick the ingredients you want, and just like you did before, you drop them onto the campfire, but now there's a pot bowl thing to catch them and cook them. Now it's a little thing, but the fact the player has to get out the ingredients, move over to the pot, and put them in, makes it feel like you're more involved in the whole process. You're not watching a menu, or an animation you have no control over hiding behind another menu. Sure, once you put the food in, you are watching animation play, but it's designed much better than just a simple animation. Firstly, it stops the player from doing anything for a short time, which is important. You have to focus on it. This animation, played alongside with the cooking sound effect, is long enough to stir up anticipation. You really get excited for the food to come out all cooked, just like in real life, but short enough so that most players won't go, okay, yeah, I get it, hurry up. It is also important that it does eat up a small part of the player's time, as time is valuable to the player. The player doesn't want to waste time cooking in this game when it's not useful to them, which gives the food they do create more value. Compare that to some games where pressing one button just shits out a meal, and before you know it you have 50 meals lined up, you don't care what you cooked, you might as well have just been cooking health kits. Sometimes when the games are designed like this, I end up cooking stuff because it's better to have 10 meals instead of 30 ingredients. I end up cooking to tidy up my inventory. But in Breath of the Wild, it's a waste of time and a lot of ingredients to make that many meals. As you get further into the game, you also learn ingredients that are rarer than others give off better effects. So it's a waste to just shove them into a meal to just make more health items. In fact, a lot of what makes the cooking great in this game is that it's open enough to let you throw in any old shit in, but is smart enough to punish you for it, and rewards the player when they actually plan out a meal with a purpose to it. Do I need to cook food that's going to give me stronger defense, for example, better attack, help me survive in harsher climates? And one of the things you start to learn is meat is where the hearts are at, so you start to hunt. The great thing about how the hunting and fishing works in this game is how open it is. To get meat, you just need to kill an animal. How you do that is up to you. Okay, I don't mean that in an E3 sandbox reveal kind of way, but in a way where the player actually has options and are able to choose the easiest way for them to get the food. For example, being sneaky with a bow works fine when there's lots of cover, and you're able to get fairly close to the animal quite easily. But when you're in an open area, riding a horse and chasing down animals is much quicker. Compare this to how it would have worked in older Legend of Zelda games. To fish for a fish, for example, there would need to be a special fishing area. The only way you'd be able to get the fish would be with a special tool like a fishing rod. And to equip it, you'd have to go into a little menu, and then when you do use it, the whole UI will change, and it would start to feel like its own little mini game. But now to get fish, you just need to see fish in the water, and then you can fire an arrow, or throw a weapon at them, or dive in like a madman and grab them out of the water. This makes it much more instinctive and intuitive, which are two words that mean basically the same thing, but it makes me feel smarter by saying both of them. Not only does this leave the game more open how you do stuff, but also creates a better sense of flow in the game. This comes down to how the game is designed to make key tasks feel less disconnected from each other. Different types of weapons don't use their own unique UI and controls anymore. A lot of the UI which is on the screen stays there, meaning you're always looking at the same layout no matter what you're doing, but it's also nicely pushed down to the sides and corners so it's not in your way, so when you need to focus on the game world your brain is able to blur it out. Some of the UI is even partly transparent, making it easier for you to block it out. Similar UI design has been used in Rockstar's Red Dead Redemption and Grand Theft Auto 5, two games both celebrated for their ability to immerse their player in their game worlds. Now imagine if the UI was broken down into smaller pieces that only popped up when they were really relevant. Say, the temperature gauge only popped up if the player entered a hotter or colder climate. You're getting really immersed into this game, but then you enter a hot or cold location and the game pushes this gauge into the screen. You want to look at it because your brain picks up on something moving. It makes it seem like the game is going, hey, look at this bit of UI, and you're broken out of the flow and you become aware you're playing a game while you're playing a game, which is a horrible thing to happen. The point being, it's actually better to leave the UI still and in the corners of the screen, instead of the game playing cleanup every few minutes and moving the UI. Another way the Breath of the Wild creates flow is how consistently the player is able to use the same techniques. A lot of how the player has been fighting enemies can be used to hunt. You can use the same weapons and approaches on animals and you'll get the same advantages for using them. The key here is that they're always useful. For example, I find myself using the glider to get the drop on animals and critters just as much as I use it on enemies. And because so much of the game is so universal, you find yourself changing equipment because it's what you think is the best equipment to use, not because the game is telling you to. You start to think, okay, spears and arrows are good for range, so I'll have them ready for open areas. But the big swords and clubs have nice area control, so I'll switch to that when I start to get swarmed with loads of enemies. I find myself going from fighting to hunting pretty regularly, which wouldn't work in the game if I needed to keep switching from specific weapons and approaches that only work for fighting to then switching back to certain weapons and approaches that only work for hunting. What's great is that good food gives you good bonuses, which means for the later parts of the game, food and meals can become just as useful as the equipment and weapons you pick up. So preparing food becomes part of the planning, and by extension making the hunting and gathering part of the planning as well. As you'll need to prepare and plan for the big, most likely story-impacting moments of the game, the hunting and cooking provides some good downtime. Downtime refers to when a machine is off or not performing, but in the magical world of video games, downtime refers to the quieter parts of the game where the player can relax and take part in less intense gameplay, which is still entertaining. Downtime is important to keep the action parts of the game impactful and exciting. In more linear games, cutscenes or sections where you can take your time, like climbing or puzzle sections, are used to break up the action. Even in games that are nothing but action, like fighters and online shooters, I've started adding game mechanics to give the player a reason to keep playing when they want to take a break. What makes the downtime in the Breath of the Wild seem smarter than most is how it's implemented in a game that is this open. The more intense the gameplay, the more food the player is likely to go through. The more food the player goes through, the more hunting and cooking they'll need to do. The more hunting and cooking they need to do, the more downtime the player gets. So put simply, the more intense the gameplay the player is going through, the more downtime they'll need to go through to continue, which is the sort of balance of intensity and downtime you need. And if you need to prepare for something big, you'll need the big bonuses, which are harder to find, which will extend the downtime before something really intense. In fact, a lot of preparing in this game is linked to downtime, such as one of the ways you can get more health is through completing shrines, which act as the small puzzle section of this game, which as I said before, is a great source of downtime. Now what makes the Breath of the Wild really great isn't just how it uses its food and hunting for its downtime, or how key tasks like hunting and fighting are streamlined, or how it starts you off what little scraps you can find off the ground. I mean, all of that is great really, but what makes the Breath of the Wild really great can be summed up with how the purpose of the food and meals for the player changes throughout the game. Remember how I made such a point about how you start off with a stick and a mushroom? Well, at that point, any little goblin fella can straight up kill you, and you don't have enough base health to really invest in any food that's going to give you bonuses. You just need to recover whatever little health you do have. At that point, everything you do is to stop you from dying. At that point, you're just trying to survive. So you get food and cooked meals with the purpose of gaining health back, with the purpose of surviving. But as you play more and more, you start to gain your bearings, and you start to understand the game and the world more. You start to learn the basic tactics and learn how to gain bonuses from food you're cooking. You learn to better prepare yourself on how to grow your character and where to get the better equipment. You start to find food and cooked meals with the purpose of experimenting and trying out different approaches. You also start to live on what little things you find in the world and how to approach problems based on what you do have. Such as leaving that one really good weapon you do have for a big boss type enemy, or keeping hold of the 1 or 2 ingredients you need for when you have enough to make a meal with a really great bonus. And then again you get better at the game, and Link becomes stronger and you find even better equipment in the world. Now you're able to plan what you need and where to find it, and also how to use it, whether it be weapons, food, armor, or horse, whatever. You are now finding food and cooking meals with the purpose of preparation. You have gone from surviving in a world you barely understand, to understanding and living in it, to then using the wild world around you against your enemy. This game's approach to the player learning almost everything by themselves, doing everything for themselves, surviving on their own in an open world with little to no society in it, is exactly what a game called The Breath of the Wild should be about. And this game does that amazingly. What makes Breath of the Wild great is you're no longer playing a Link who lived on a farm, who goes off to fight shadow demons to save his village, or a Link who sails the seas to save his sister. You're a Link who's a wandering hobo, who's trying to stop the world pretty much getting destroyed a second time, and he knows just the right combinations of mushrooms, meat, and moblin guts he needs to kill you. Oh, and everything he has, he's built himself from raw materials or stole from people long dead. Hi, thanks for watching. I'm Courtney, I made the video. So this was a first sort of pilot episode of a new series I'm doing called What Makes It Great, where the main purpose is to be more positive about games, but also to sort of analyse essentially what they do well. And based on that, I'd like some feedback to know, was it interesting enough? Was it entertaining enough? Was the video too long, too short? And maybe just any general other stuff which you might want me to look at or anything like that, that would be great. Of course, my focus is still to making animations and silly cartoons for the internet. This is just a series made as something that I can make a lot quicker than animation that I can sort of use as a filler to fill gaps between projects. Like right now I'm doing something which is taking a lot longer than I thought it would. So yeah, that's essentially it. So again, thanks for watching, and the next one I'm probably going to be doing of this will probably be Injustice 2, because it's a game I'm sort of looking forward to. And yeah, if you like this one, you do all the like, favourite and subscribe stuff, Again, thanks for watching.